Hi guys, I just wanted to answer another question I get a lot. I just want to bring things that I see maybe coming up more so in my job. I just like to present it here. I like to kind of be a little bit of a window from a psych hospital into just provide information for others. So one of the things I wanted to focus on today is basically a picture of psychosis from the population that I work with, mainly focusing with adolescents. So I wanted to give kind of a rough definition, rough understanding of what psychosis is, at least from my perspective. I'm not going to go into detail on that. You guys can Google this. You guys can look it up. You can pull up the DSM. You can get an idea of what the signs and symptoms are. So basically, just from essentially what we go off is basically a detachment from reality, an inability to filter reality out from something that's maybe not there, whether that's external or internal. Just impaired thought, impaired reasoning, maybe a lot of hyperactivity, aggression, repetitive movements, maybe audio, responding to external or internal stimuli, tactile hallucinations, maybe where a person is feeling like there's something on their skin. A lot of times people report feeling like bugs are crawling in their skin or on their body. I've seen a lot of paranoia, hyper-religious, at least recently, this past year. Sometimes kids will be, at least the few that I've worked with, really hyper-religious, hyper-fixated on just delusions of grandeur, that they are God or Jesus reincarnate, that they are here to save the world. The last kid I worked with believed that he was basically a combination of Buddha and Jesus combined together, and it was his journey to heal people, and he was on his own journey. He was actually found wandering the desert, completely naked. He had tons of burns and just lesions all over his skin from being just out and exposed to the elements for extended periods of time. It was a good thing he was able to be found and brought back in. A lot of the times, you kind of get a picture. I think there's a stereotype formed of what this looks like, and sometimes it's not always that severe. Sometimes it can be kind of wrapped under layers of somebody who's, maybe it's not to the full extent. It's almost, sometimes people can make it seem like a rational argument. Another kid I was working with was convinced that the government was taking over, that they were planning to start just expelling unwanted people, killing mass people, interning people into mass concentration camps, and he was really trying to prepare for this. As you talk to him on the surface level, it seems like, okay, maybe he's just struggling with some anxiety, maybe some current events, but as you kind of go under layers and keep asking questions and pulling back, it turns out, he's starting to create his own religion, and he's also using substances. He is really it goes on and on and on. He's creating his own prophet. It's all these delusions, all these detachments from reality, not being able to see that compared to where everyone else is at. So it's really sad, especially in kids. It's really hard for parents. It's tough when parents are asking me, is this treatable? Is this curable? What's the plan for it? First of all, maybe at least a lot of the times with the kids I've seen, there's substance use that's tied into it. Maybe there's a family history of schizophrenia or psychosis, and they start experimenting with various drugs, alcohol, just name a few, and it just exacerbates everything with them, with their symptoms. So just kind of getting an idea of what it is, where it's coming from. I think it's really important as well to not start self-diagnosing or trying to diagnose your kid or a family member. Just because they might be having it seems like maybe they're delusional or having a detachment for reality. We're seeing them doing some strange repetitive behaviors or even talking to themselves. There could be a lot of other explanations. It might be a medication. Sometimes bipolar or autism might explain some of the symptoms. It's really important that if you're worried about this, to get that person in to see a psychiatrist. A lot of the times it can be, especially with the teenagers, and I don't want to speak too much for adults, that's not my area of expertise. A lot of it can be treated and managed if it's caught early enough. I've only seen one or so kid that was so far where it's just like, this is not going to come back for right now. And there was just a lot of heavy substance use, and that maybe psychosis was substance use related. At that point, it was really hard, almost impossible to tell. The kid was almost, it was to the point where you couldn't really have a rational or reasonable conversation with him. You know, but just again, lots of paranoia, aggression, behavioral agitation, hypervigilance. You know, one of the other kids that I had was absolutely convinced that the FBI was following him around. He was seeing a lot of visual hallucinations, seeing these orange boxes that apparently the FBI was placing around the unit, placing around his home, and it was leading into just this constant paranoia, inability to sleep, just lots of thought, and you know, disturbances was starting to lead to this kid having extreme bizarre behaviors, over the top bizarre behaviors. That's just, it was incredible. You know, and another difficulty with this is dealing with the parents in this situation. Sometimes they want everything to be fixed and resolved, and it's just not really going to happen. It's not going to come all the way back. You know, my supervisor was telling me for some parents and some family members, this is almost like having a death in the family. Sometimes that person that they knew may not be coming back entirely as they used to know them. You know, they might always struggle with some forms of psychosis, always struggle with hearing voices to some degree. I think it's really important. I've seen at least a major correlation with substance use. I'm not here to make an opinion one way or another on this, but I know definitely dabbling in psychoactive substances has been shown there is at least some kind of a correlation, a link between that and increasing in agitation of symptoms relating to psychosis. Anyhow, I just want to put out some of that just to give a brief picture of what it looks like on our end. It's not all that is portrayed in movies and films and things like that. It's very disturbing. It's very uncomfortable. It's very serious. That being said, there's lots of treatments. There's lots of different options. Maintaining sobriety, getting on the right kind of medication. Obviously, getting people with this condition to continue to take medication can be a real challenge. Sometimes they are reporting that the voices told me to stop taking my meds, and so I did. Started to flare up again. They stopped taking their meds, and it blows back up into a really serious situation. So there's actually injectable medications that last for, you know, a month or two on end that usually people respond really well to. Sometimes they have to test that ability to see if that's going to work or see if it's going to have any reverse effects, which it can. But there are a lot of options out there. There's a lot, including, not to downplay, just therapy on top of the medication, avoiding substances, getting to see regular therapist, support groups. There's lots of options out there. So if you know someone, you have a family member that's struggling with maybe some psychosis or schizophrenia, just know that there's lots of support out there for that person. So anyhow, I just wanted to put this out, maybe do a few more videos on mental health and some of my experiences, some of the things I've seen. If you have questions, put it in the comments below, and I'd be happy to answer or clarify something. I know everything I go over has been really, it's just surface level. Just keep that in mind. It's absolute surface level of some of these topics. I'm not going into detail. If you guys want to go into detail, there's definitely a lot of resources out there for you to dig through. I can point you in the direction of some. This is just my experience. Anyhow, thank you guys.